Representative Long.
Madam Speaker, I move that House File 2476 as amended be taken from the table.
Representative Long moves that House File 2476 be taken from the table. All those, this is a non-debatable motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The motion prevails. Representative, the clerk will report the bill.
House File number 2476, an act relating to children.
Members, we are on the Schultz motion to reconsider the vote whereby Representative Hicks' amendment to House File 2476. There is a roll call. Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The chief clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Carroll.
There you go.
Carroll, no.
Carroll, no. Howard.
Howard, no.
Howard, no. Cagle.
Cagle, no.
Cagle, no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 61 ayes and 69 nays, the motion does not prevail. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File number 2476, as amended.
Third reading, discussion. The member from Fillmore, Representative Davis.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and yes, I am from Fillmore.
Representative Davis.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I know we look a lot alike. Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. House File 2476, it has a lot of wasteful spending in it. It does nothing to adequately address the child care crisis. You know, we've lost around 1,000 family child care centers, child care facilities just in the last few years. That's unprecedented. And it's not right. I'm not a big fan, those who serve in committees with me, I've spoken about this a lot. I'm not a big fan of spending other people's money. And that's what we do here. We spend a lot of other people's money. I remember I'm a freshman, so I've only been here last year, and now here this year. And we've spent a lot of other people's money, the people's money. And just to clarify, I don't have a problem with spending the people's money on roads, bridges, clean water, law enforcement, obviously, from earlier, law enforcement, critical needs. I'm all on board with that. We should all be on board with that. Educating our children for their needs, you know, like reading, writing, arithmetic. Reading, writing, arithmetic. Reading. And I hope you all work with me and this side of the aisle to get the governor's attention on this one. Reading scores down 16% since he came into office. Please help us convince him that he needs to spend more time being concerned about the well-being of our children, because he spends a lot of time letting us know that he's a teacher or was a teacher. He spends a lot of time letting Minnesota know that we're trying to ban books, which is absolutely false. We're just trying to keep inappropriate material out of the hands of fifth graders. Please help us with that message. Another thing I don't have a problem spending money on, critical infrastructure. We need a new digital superhighway in SSIS. Thank you, Representative Nelson, for the effort and the attention that you've brought to the fact that we need a critical infrastructure upgrade when it comes to SSIS. But you didn't seem too interested in helping us with that problem either. Instead, in my first 2 years here, my first term, we blew through an $18 billion surplus. It would have been the perfect time to rebuild that critical infrastructure right there, Representative Nelson. And I don't think it would have taken 10 years. It probably would have taken more like 2, maybe 3 years to rebuild that. And so we could have been potentially looking at a new system next year. We blew through an $18 billion surplus. We raised taxes by nearly $10 billion. We grew government by almost 40%. All at a time when Minnesotans are really struggling. And Minnesota is well on its way to becoming the #1 employer in the state. Folks, that should not be. The state of Minnesota should not be the #1 employer in the state. We have a bloated bureaucracy, folks. I've spent time in committee talking about the two philosophies. I think I'll spare us tonight. But socialism versus free market capitalism, socialism versus Reaganomics. A great president from our past, President Reagan, he had this awesome idea. Okay, maybe I will go into it just briefly. Awesome idea that when you lower taxes and let the people actually keep their hard-earned money, guess what they do? They spend it into the economy. They sow it into our economy. That then in turn builds our economy. People spend more money. Businesses are thriving. People can get paid more when businesses are thriving. And guess what that does for the government? It brings in more tax money. When you actually let people keep more of their money. Reagan proved that it worked. He said this, he said, I'll give you a couple Reagan quotes. He said, "Death and taxes may be inevitable, but unjust taxes are not." And I believe that that's what this bill is going to help with. Unjust taxes on Minnesotans. He also said this, "The power to tax is the power to destroy." Are we destroying the lives of Minnesotans and their income by taxing the hell out of them? Because a lot of Minnesotans, they're paying 30 to 40% in taxes between the federal and state government. 30 to 40% of the money that they work very hard for is going to pay income taxes. 30 to 40%, and in some situations more than that. Think about that. That's money that they need to provide for their families. And we're robbing them of it. Taking money from hardworking people and giving it to people who don't work so hard for it, that's immoral. It's wrong. You want to know what else is immoral? Fraud. I've heard a lot of that in the first 2 years of being here, too. I've seen a lot of bills come through committee that have the potential for fraud. Feeding our future is in the news again, folks. Massive fraud scheme involving more than $250 million stolen right from under Governor Walz's nose. It's a scheme that involved a web of shady nonprofits with the aim of stealing money from hungry kids and vulnerable adults. It's a scheme that involved imaginary kids, fake receipts, made-up invoices, kickbacks, and bribes galore. You know, let me just say, I'm real happy that none of us are involved in that. Or are we? So far, this federal investigation has resulted in more than 70 defendants, nearly 20 guilty pleas, and this week marks the opening of the first trial of several Feeding Our Future defendants. In their opening statements, prosecutors revealed messages between conspirators where one of the defendants
Stay in point
wrote,
of order.
Masons 101.
The food
confining
stuff-
your- I have the
Representative
floor.
Davis, Representative Long has the floor.
I'm sorry.
Masons 101, debate must be confined to the question before the body. Talking about a trial is not the question before the body, which is a bill that we are discussing.
Members, please keep your remarks to the discussion of the bill. Representative Davis.
Will do, Madam Speaker, and thank you. And if Representative Long could have just waited like 5 more seconds, I was getting to my point, which I will continue. One of the defendants wrote, "This food stuff is kind of a golden ticket," and that's what I want to focus on. This food stuff is kind of a golden ticket, they wrote. Another one bragged, "In 7 months, if things stay the same, you are a multi-millionaire with zero debt." Almost sounds like a magic money tree of fraud. Yeah, we'll keep shaking that tree. You provided a golden ticket for fraud and burglarizing the Minnesota taxpayer. We should all be against burglary. The reason I bring this up is we know that fraud is not limited to nutritional programs. We've seen fraud in the CCAP program, the adult care program, the PCA program, and we find many connections between these schemes. Democrats haven't changed their way. The Democrat Party has not changed their way. I'm sitting this year in committee listening to a bill on universal basic income. And I'm sitting in committee, and you know, my mind was blown away last year quite often with what I heard, and this year was no different. We're going to give folks $500 a month for 18 months. Hey, let me repeat that. $500 a month for 18 months, and all they have to do is meet 300% over the poverty level or under. Now, I don't like to give away my income, but I went home so shocked. I said, "Honey, you got to punch in the numbers. Do we qualify?" And sure enough, we qualified. I couldn't believe it. No, I would not sign up for such a ridiculous program. And I even asked a question in the committee. So let's say someone gets signed up for this, and the next day they go out and they get a job that's a very good paying job, will they then get taken off the program? And I was told, no, they'll continue to stay on that program for 18 months. And you don't even need to prove that you're a resident of Minnesota, and you don't have to prove that you're a United States citizen. And you want to know the ones that would be in charge of overseeing the money? You know where the state would give the money to?
Point of order, Madam Speaker.
Nonprofits.
State your point of
Which
order.
is going right
Masons
into my
will have
next
the floor.
point that has to do with this bill.
Representative Davids.
Masons
Representative Long.
101 must confine remarks to the subject of the debate. The provision that the representative is speaking to is not in the bill, so it is not the subject of our debate.
Members, please keep your remarks to the discussion of the bill. Back to you, Representative Davis.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I will just say I will not be bullied into shutting out the voice of my district, because this is important to my district, and their voice will be heard on this House floor. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Clay, Representative. Representative Davis,
My mic is still working, right?
you
Okay.
still have the floor.
Thank you. So I will continue. That bill had that was like feeding our future on steroids. Then we look no further than across the street for misplaced priorities. Excuse me. There. A $750 million palace for us politicians. $730 million. This project is being
Point of order,
funded
Madam Speaker.
through a standing and open
State your point of order.
appropriation.
I wish I didn't have to keep rising, but the member is not speaking to the bill. He is speaking to, it sounds like anything but the bill. We have other bills that we can debate in the future, but right now we are debating the Children and Families Bill. If he'd like, I can provide him a copy of the bill so he can take a look at what's in it and can focus his remarks to it.
Members, please keep your remarks to the discussion of the bill. Representative Davis.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Don't worry, Representative Long, I'm almost done. And what I've noticed, and I now have to take the time to explain why this is relevant to the bill, why I cannot support fraud and wasteful spending. Do I really need to explain that? I guess so. And that's what it has to do with the bill before us, Representative Long. Folks on this floor are constantly explaining their heart, their story, and reasons why they can't support a bill. Please do not shut down the voice of my district in doing so. This project is being funded, the $750 million palace for politicians being funded through a standing and open appropriation. That means even if we adjourned right now, sine die, which what a blessing that would be, the hedge fund managers financing that palace with extravagant balconies, they'll still get paid. They'll still get paid. While parents with children continue to wait for affordable child care. Is that reason enough to talk about this regarding this bill? I think so. While parents and children continue to wait for affordable child care. Yeah, you already blew through an $18 billion surplus, raised taxes by nearly $10 billion, and grew government by nearly 40%, all the while that Minnesotans are hurting. Democrats are making life harder and more expensive for Minnesotans. Also, politicians can have an extravagant office and a monument to big government. Not only this bill, but the bill in taxes has come in Minnesota. and the price is going to have to be paid. Buckle up. It's time to hold this majority accountable. I cannot support this bill. Please vote no on this bill.
The member from Wright, Representative Hudson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So this year in Children and Families started out with a fair amount of pageantry. I believe we had our first committee hearing before the session even started, and it was for the purpose of showcasing the idea of what is called the Great Start Affordability Scholarships. And this is the premise that we're going to provide state funding to pay for families' child care above 7% of household income. Like just no cap, nothing, we're just gonna pay for all of it. And we've spent so much time, like a real lion's share of our time in Children and Families, hearing the sales pitch for this idea. And it's a great sales pitch. It's absolutely fantastic. It actually has a lot of merit, as any good sales pitch would. Talking about the value of early childhood education, talking about the economic utility of spending money on childcare, talking about all the features and benefits, and really hooking in there with the emotional hook of caring about our kids, appealing to the fact that we all do care about our kids and we want to get them off to a good start. We want them to be able to read. We want them to be able to have that executive function. We want them to be able to succeed in life. Absolutely fantastic sales pitch on the features and benefits of paying for everybody's child care. But there's been a critical piece missing from the sales pitch that has prevented it from ever being closed, and is, I suspect, the reason why it's not included in this bill that has come before us today. And that's the price tag. Really a big deal. Really the crucial component of any given sales pitch, because it's not until you hear the price, it's not until you hear what's it gonna cost me, that you're able to actually engage in the value calculation, the cost-benefit analysis of, yes, I'm sure this value is great. I'm sure this Lamborghini is really fast and pretty, but can I afford it in the context of my budget? That's the question that we ultimately have to ask ourselves. And I'm doing some quick and dirty math on this, so take it with a grain of salt. But just doing the quick and dirty math, and I think some of these figures match up with some of the things that we've heard in Children and Families. The average family that pays for childcare is paying somewhere between $10,000 to $16,000 a year. And I believe that's per child. There are roughly 200 to 250,000 families in the state who need to engage with childcare services. That translates to somewhere between $2 and $4 billion spent on childcare in the state of Minnesota every single year. Now, our state budget, which, as we all know, is a biennium budget, meaning it represents 2 years, is about $72 billion after you increased it by 40% last year. If you break that down into per year, which is, we all know, it's not exactly how it works, but just for the sake of argument, $36 billion per year spent in the state of Minnesota. So if we were actually going to do this, if we were going to fulfill this promise, if we were actually going to deliver on the pageantry and pay for people's child care, it would cost the state somewhere between 5.5% to 11% of our entire state budget. And that's the recently elevated by 40% Minnesota state budget. I don't know, when you're considering buying something and it's gonna cost between 6 and 11% of your entire income for the year, no matter how good it sounds, no matter how much actual functional value it has, it gives you a moment of pause. Do we have the money to do this? And obviously the answer is no, because we're not doing it. There's not a whole lot in this bill to support. Instead of focusing on providing for those promises that have been made and delivering on the sales pitch offered with pageantry, we're instead increasing the size and scope of government, setting up a brand new state agency, creating new careers for state bureaucrats, and potentially funding a fair amount of fraud. On top of that, we've seen extensive discussions in committee about the need to improve the Social Services Information System, or SSIS. We had a debate over an amendment from Representative Nelson yesterday on that topic. Everybody knows the system is antiquated. He spent quite a lot of time reflecting upon what it was like in 1992, I believe it was. Was it 99? 99. Yeah, great year. I'll tell you what, I've got a laptop at home that barely works. I bought it just before my second son was born, so that would have been about 2012. So 12-year-old laptop, yeah, about that time, technology starts to really poop out on you. And we're talking about a system that's twice as old as that, and then some. Instead of focusing on fixing that, we're setting up this new Department of Children, Youth, and Families. And it kind of reminds me, there's a couple of different analogies that pop into the head, like spinning rims on your Honda, or buying into a timeshare when you need to fix the plumbing in your house. Just doesn't seem like a very wise financial decision to be expanding, to be building a new agency and investing in new bureaucracy so that we can have more people looking at the system that doesn't work, the system that's causing us problems, something that's recognized on both sides of the aisle, extremely antiquated system, can't do basic things that you would expect any technology to be able to do in the scope and in the role of trying to serve families. But instead of focusing on that, instead of making sure that we have the tools so that, maybe, here's the thing, if we increased the bandwidth of the folks who are already providing these services by giving them the tools they need, maybe we wouldn't need to hire more people and expand the scope of government and set up a whole new agency. But that's not the direction that this bill takes. And again, I'll just highlight the fact that no matter how much you want, and I know you want, to actually fulfill that promise, I know you do. If you could snap your fingers and materialize $4 billion to spend on childcare, you would absolutely do it. But you can't. That's how money works. It's a finite resource. What was her name? The English Prime Minister who talked about once you run out of other people's money? Margaret Thatcher, thank you. That's where we're at. You've literally run out of other people's money. $17.5 billion surplus gone. $10 billion raised in taxes, 40% increase in the state budget, and still can't do what you say you want to do. Well, that's, again, how money works. You run out of it, then you can't do anything anymore. And that's where we're at. And I think there's a lesson to be learned from that informs how it is that we got to where we're at, where this is even an issue, because this wasn't an issue when I was growing up. Childcare? This wasn't the topic of public debates about how much money, what percentage of the state budget is going to be spent on paying for people's children to be taken care of while they go to work. My dad was the sole breadwinner in a blue-collar area. I was brought home to a small house in an inner-ring suburb around Detroit, and my dad was the only one who worked. My mom stayed home with us. He paid the mortgage on that house. He maintained 2 vehicles. Occasionally we went on trips. Occasionally we ate out. We lived a pretty blessed life. Wasn't great, wasn't perfect. There were problems, believe you me, but we got by. And we were never worried about childcare. It wasn't an issue. And as it turns out, you roll back the clock even further, this has been the way of things for all of human history. Childcare has not really been an issue that's been a topic of political debate. It has become an issue, and this is important, it's become an issue because of exactly this type of irresponsible fiscal management of public dollars. The economy has gotten worse for families, not just here in the state of Minnesota, but throughout the United States of America. It is reflected in the inflation that we're all seeing. I don't know about you, but this is a pretty busy lifestyle, legislating, especially this time of year. Sometimes you have to make some pretty unhealthy food choices, go through the drive-through, what have you. I've been noticing those prices ticking up in real time, like almost like you're watching a stock ticker. And certainly going to the grocery store, going to the gas station, God forbid you try to take your family out. I mean, a price tag at a bill that comes at the end of a dinner for your family, the price that you now have to pay every single time you do it is what I remember paying on like special occasions, right? Like you would go out and really throw caution in the wind and show the family a good time and then get that 3-figure bill at the end of the night and go, whew, I'm glad I don't do this every day. Well, now it's pretty much every day. Now if you go out and you're feeding more than 2-3 people, you're going to be crossing that 3-figure barrier. And this is the reality of why we find ourselves where we're at. We sit here and we talk about childcare as if this is something that the state has always had to concern itself with. It hasn't. The reason it does have to concern itself with it is because the dollars that people bring home to provide for their families are not worth as much as they used to be. By a damn sight. And that doesn't just happen naturally. The way money's supposed to work, value's produced, the money is a representation of that value. It's not supposed to change. It goes up, or the value goes down, because the amount of money goes up, the supply, government spending. The only reason that you were able to increase the state budget by 40% last year, the only reason is because of the money being printed at the federal level. It's because the federal government did you a favor and created it out of thin air and then handed it on down in the form of grants. Huge chunk of that surplus that we all celebrated, some of us celebrated more than others, that was one-time federal funds that came hot off the presses of the Fed. And when you do that, when you print money and then you spend it without a equivalent amount of value production, value creation, the value of those dollars goes down. Not right away. The first people to touch it, which are that 1% that ironically you complain about, the rich who keep getting richer, this is why. It's because they get first dibs on the imaginary money we print. And by the time it gets into my hands, your hands, the average Minnesotan's hands, it's worth significantly less. It's a Ponzi scheme. That is what has driven us to where we're at now. And so the problem with this bill is that it fails to acknowledge that. In fact, it continues to double down on the idea that the solution to all our problems is just to spend more public dollars. Let's just spend more of it. Let's continue to suggest ideas that are going to cost billions of dollars that we don't have, but maybe somebody will print it somewhere. The reality is this state is headed towards a structural deficit. We know it's coming. And it was entirely predictable. I know I was saying it. Math is math. Numbers are numbers. Value is value. You spend it, it's gone. And so what we're headed towards is a scenario where we're going to have a fancy new agency with a bunch of new hires who are standing around wondering how they're going to get their job done because their computers don't work. They're pretty good for playing Oregon Trail and not much else. And we don't have any money to allocate for them, to appropriate for them, because we done spent it all. This is a bill that rearranges the deck chairs on a ship that is sailing in the wrong direction, and members, we should vote no. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Ramsey, Representative Finke.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just wanted to speak really quickly to the experience that I had working with Chair Pinto and the committee, Vice Chair Keeler. I'm new here. As was said earlier, some of us are new here, and the experience that I had with the bill that is in this bill was really kind of that vision you have when you want to get into doing policy making, where you have community members and they come to you and they say, we have a very specific problem that we think that you can help. And then you go to the chair and you say, I have this problem, how do we solve it? And then we put together a bill, and then we get the help of the people around us. And then you build support for it, and you bring it, and you move it. And it has been like really rewarding to me. And I feel like calling out that because I feel sometimes we I don't know what you do. Sometimes I forget why we're here. We spend a lot of time in this room this week. And so this has just been a really great experience. I'm hopeful that this will go forward. I'm hopeful that my community will get the help that the advocates who came that day to talk to me desperately knew that our community needed, and we're going to shepherd something really good forward. And I just want to thank Chair Pinto for that, Vice Chair Keeler, Coley Colburn, and especially Molly Peterson, who just did so much work to help me see this work done. And what we do here is like really cool, and it helps a lot of people. So thank you so much, Chair Pinto.
The member from Clay, Representative Keeler.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I'm really excited to talk about this bill. When we first got elected, we came in a pandemic. We call ourselves the Corona class. But at the same time, we also had an online division that was talking about preventing homelessness. Representative New Brindley was on that with Chair Gomez and I, and we really deeply understood the issues that we have around homelessness. So that you guys know, from a number standpoint, the point in time count from 2023 says that there's 8,393 individuals on one day that identified as homeless in this state. And for any of you who have worked with the point in time count, we know that that's a very low number because there's no possible way that we can count everybody in one day. But the point is, that's far too many in my mind. I live in a world that I do really believe that it's important to love our neighbors as ourselves and practice that in the work that we do. I often say that I enter into this space to lead with love, and I believe that what this bill has done that. But also, I understand what you guys are saying about being mindful about money. And I want to kind of spin the narrative, not like we're giving handouts to people, but this is a really fiscal investment. What we know is homelessness and food insecurities do cost Minnesotans. There is a massive tax burden when there's one individual who's experienced homelessness. We learned this in the Preventing Homelessness Division when Dr. Foldis came in and talked to us about a cohort that he did. He worked with over 1,000 youth and followed them for a year. And what we learned in that data from 2021, and costs have risen since then, and so I'm sure this number is a little bit low too, but what we learned is in a lifetime of an individual from the age of 16 to 64, which is the average life expectancy, a homeless individual, one homeless individual in the state of Minnesota is a tax burden of roughly $300,000. So now you do the math, and I'm not going to math publicly because I'm not good at math and I'm dyslexic, but just think about $300,000 times the 8,393 people that we have in that state. That's a lot of money that is being spent on individuals that are in Minnesota, who I know many of you on both sides of the aisle have experienced some level of homelessness, near homelessness, or know somebody who really matters to you that has struggled with homelessness at some point in your life. Whether that means you were sleeping in a car during your college life because you couldn't afford rent, whether that means your family had a medical issue that wasted all of your savings in one time and wiped you out and you lost your home and you weren't prepared for it. These aren't just choices. These aren't just people choosing not to do something with their life. This is not go to the boot store and pull your bootstraps up, because to be honest, I've been saying this for a long time. I don't wear boots, I wear moccasins, and we have to create a world where we are seeing everybody for the needs that they have. And so I'm really proud of the work we've been able to do. I appreciate Chair Pinto allowing me to be a strong voice for homelessness and food insecurities. But I think it's important to understand that the data that was shared with us said that only 6% of that cohort had to get out of poverty to offset the cost. And so this is an investment. This is a mass investment. We want a strong, robust economy. And I have said it over and over and over, and you can disagree, but I know that it's true. If you don't have a home to sleep in at night, and you don't know where your next meal is coming from, you cannot be your best self. And I think we all believe that we want every Minnesotan to be able to have the ability to be their best self and provide what it is that the Creator designed for them to do in this state. And I truly believe, with many others, that that starts with a home and food. I've appreciated the bipartisan conversation around this and really understanding that this is an issue. We weren't able to do enough because we are so far in a deficit when it comes to supporting our neighbors. I do want to give some stats around food insecurities because it's something that we've been able to approach. Food shelf visits, you guys, have gone up 40% in 1 year. And that is not just in my district, that is in every one of your districts. I'm not gonna do like a raise of hands, but how many of you volunteer at your food shelf or your local food pantry, or you do it with your local church organization, or you donate foods in a food drive for your college? It is everywhere. 40% of an increase in our food shelves. 1 in 6 of your neighbors are experiencing food insecurities. 1 in 11 are kids. They're kids. When I worked in the school districts, I used to have snacks at my office all the time because behavior issues would happen, kids aren't listening, and at the end of the day, when you're hungry, how many of you have sat in here and have enough snacks to last us the 11 hours we're in here? Our brains aren't working when we're hungry. I say it in committee, when we're hungry, we're hangry, and when we're hangry, we're just not our best Minnesotan self. So that's important, but also, as much as we talk about caring about our citizens, this is one of the areas that Children and Family expands outside of just children and family. We're addressing food insecurities from beginning of life to end of life, and it is really sad to me that the fastest growing community that is utilizing our food shelves are our elders, individuals who are 60 years old or plus are the fastest growing community that are utilizing food shelves. Those are the people who took care of us. Those are the people who taught us the wisdom that we have. Those are the people who led us into the spaces that we're in now, and we're starving them. That should be a problem for all of us. The other thing that we were able to do is open up some of the SNAP programming. I am a couponer because I live in poverty, and I think couponing on a legislative way at a state level is looking at how we can leverage some of our federal funds. And so what we've been able to do is we've been able to utilize SNAP funding to open up some federal funds. And so what we are doing in this bill is opening SNAP to higher education students. We're identifying that higher education is an occupation that would be eligible for you and your students to be eligible for SNAP. How many of you have higher education institutions or colleges or community colleges or tribal colleges in your community or near your community, or you're a parent of somebody who's going off to college, recently was in college, or will maybe be in college at one time? We want our kids who are learning at the fastest capacity to be our future professionals to have food in their stomach while they do that. And so I'm really proud of the work we've been able to do in that capacity. I also like that we're actually doing a study to look at the combination of pregnant and parenting youth who are experiencing homelessness. We don't have the answer of how to support them. And so we're doing a study to actually dive into that. We're partnering with the Wilder Foundation, who I think is fantastic in the work that they do around homelessness. And I really believe that they're gonna give us legitimate outcomes on what we can do to support that specific population. And so I appreciate the work we've been able to do. I appreciate Chair Pinto and our members. I really appreciate our staff. We push our staff in ways that is really mean. We make them work late. We make them get up early. I want to acknowledge the front desk staff who continue to stay for us to do this work. You all are really the MVPs in the work that we get to stand up and do. So I want to pause and appreciate you along with our committee staff and really take a lot of pride in voting green on this bill. Thank you.
The member from Stearns, Representative Dameth.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and members, I appreciate the debate that we had yesterday, mostly, on this bill. Chair Pinto, to you, I have had the pleasure of working with you over the years, and your commitment and your desire to help families and children was evident from when I first served on your first committee. And I do definitely appreciate that. I know Representative Hudson spoke about how you run your committees and the hard work that you do. And so I want to say thank you to that. With the bill, I do have some definite concerns as we move forward, and I want to just talk about those a little bit. I do share some of my colleagues and the issues that were brought up, the perspectives on the provisions in the bill and where they stand. But what I see this bill is as more of a growth of government. We know we have a child care shortage. We have needs across the state where we have lost specifically family child care providers, and we have made it so much harder for them to continue in the work, whether it's regulation or if it is pay, if it is the requirements that are put on them, it has made it harder. But with this bill, standing up a new state agency and growing government, it is not providing that additional child care that parents today are waiting for. Maybe in the future it might happen, but it is not providing those slots immediately as needed. And I believe that the DFL has actually promised the public and led them to believe that we were going to, this body, was going to fully fund child care. But we have heard broken and empty promises over the last year and a half and misplaced priorities. I will say, though, on a positive note, that after the failed attempt to use Feeding Our Future to feed hungry kids in Minnesota, the DFL is finally looking at options that actually empower parents rather than enriching misguided and questionable nonprofits. This bill, though, does symbolize the majority's misplaced priorities by promising everything to everyone. The DFL remained committed to the real priorities as we have seen. And I remember a former education chair talking about funding the priorities, and those are a moral statement. But we know that the majority in this body, there was enough money to, without any trouble, fully fund the light rail snaking through the Southwest Metro. And there was even extra money to add with a train to Duluth. There was also no trouble fully funding, the new Palace for Politicians right across the street, $730 million as a floor, not for childcare, but to house 134 legislators. There was also no trouble with fully funding any of the other state agencies, but promises of fully funding childcare, promises of fully funding education, or even teacher pensions were always left by the wayside, said, well, look at those next year. Or we heard the majority say, we didn't have quite enough money to do that. But it was misplaced priorities. So despite all the big promises, the bill is fairly empty. Similar to the hole that we look out of our windows across the street with the expansion of the state office building. But I'll tell you, that hole by the state office building, day by day, is being filled up. And it is being filled up using taxpayer dollars to build a palace rather than funding childcare in the state of Minnesota. We know that priorities matter. We should be funding the needs that we have heard from parents and their children before we fully fund hedge fund managers financing the palace for politicians. Members, while I appreciate the work that is done, this is not done completely in the way that we need it to best serve Minnesotans, the children, and the families. And with that, I would urge a no vote.
To the author of the bill, Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Leader Dama, thanks for your remarks, and I've indeed enjoyed working with you through the years on these issues related to young kids especially. I'd given some thank yous before, but I do need to recognize and thank my Vice Chair, Representative Keeler, for her leadership and her partnership, and Lee Daniels, who is going to be retiring and was my roommate at the very beginning of we entered the legislature together, and we've had a really nice partnership, and certainly I'm grateful to him and to all the members of the committee. And speaking of which, for the 100, I think I'm doing the math right, the 119 of you who are not on the Children and Families Committee, you've heard everybody from Representative Davis. I know I spoke with Representative Perez-Vega, agrees, everybody on our committee, all 15 of us, that there's this IT system called SSIS. Please remember those letters. We have got to make progress on that IT system. And this bill does, in fact, do that to the extent that the funds would be used in the next year. This bill absolutely does do that, and we need to continue on that. So I want to take advantage of the attention that was given to that. So members, typically when there's a discussion about a bill, folks who may be thinking about voting no, they'll talk about what's in the bill that they don't like. We hear a little bit of that. They'll talk about what's not in the bill that they wish were in the bill. Oddly, what I was hearing a lot of was things that aren't in the bill that you don't like anyway, which I think would be a reason to vote in favor of the bill. So there's not universal basic income in this bill. If you dislike that, that would be a reason for you to vote yes. And apologies if anybody wanted to be in the bill, but this happens not to be. The capital area reconstruction, that's not in the bill. If you dislike that, you are a green vote on this bill. And you know what? If you have concerns with the Great Start Affordability Scholarships, also, as you pointed out, thanks for rubbing it in, also not in the bill. So that would be a reason you're going to vote yes, I would assume. I am grateful, though, that there is such support for public investment in early care and learning. That is something, as you know, that we did a lot of last year. I don't know if folks had the chance to see the Federal Reserve report on child care providers around the state, but a lot of great information about the impact of the work we did last year. And there's a quote from a provider in Southeast Minnesota saying, "The help that the state has provided has been incredibly helpful. Without it, we would really be in trouble." So members, there is so much more to do, and I appreciate the recognition this is a public good that deserves public support. We know how important care and learning is for older kids, and I appreciate the recognition by so many folks in the minority of the importance of that for younger kids as well. And absolutely, that's something that deserves investment, and in fact, it's something that we have invested in, will continue to invest in. And one thing that has not received a highlight in this bill is the reforms to the regulations relating to, there's a weighted risk system that says to evaluate if there's a particular danger for kids. We're going to take that more seriously, but otherwise we're going to make sure that we're trying to be as supportive for providers as we possibly can. So members, there's a big difference that we are making in this bill regarding child care, and it's something that we absolutely do need to continue on. And then an area that has not received a lot of attention, I want to make sure that it does, is child protection. Members, you have seen news articles about this. If you are concerned with our child welfare system, you will be a green vote on the bill. If you're concerned about the fact that when a child dies due to maltreatment, as was highlighted in news articles, our system is cumbersome, is ineffective, problematic, this bill contains a reform to that system, broadly praised, broadly supported. A no vote would be voting against reform of that system. A no vote would be against a broader reform to our child protection systems. A no vote would be against taking action to move forward, including towards the replacement of the SSIS system. So I would hope folks would not do that. And finally, I guess there was a lot of talk about the investments in the bill spending a lot of dollars. And I guess, members, I am mindful, as Representative Keeler referenced, the idea of loving our neighbor. Tomorrow is the National Day of Prayer. A vote in favor of this bill is a vote to feed hungry Minnesotans. It's funding for food shelves in our communities that are seeing spikes in food insecurity, and for food banks as well. Spending $10 million in state dollars to have $100 million in federal dollars to make sure that the universal meals that we passed last year during the school year can extend to the summer, so we're taking care of our kids. A vote in favor of this bill is to make sure that we have funding for communities experiencing increases in homelessness. And for those communities that may have homelessness providers that may be shutting down, we have funding directly to address those issues. Members, we want to make sure that every kid gets off to a great start, that every family receives support, and that Minnesotans get to live in the dignity and be able to thrive, as we all want that to happen. That's what this bill does. Members, please join me in voting in favor of it. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The chief clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Carroll.
Carroll, aye.
Carroll, aye. Howard.
Howard, aye.
Howard, aye. Cagle.
Cagle, aye.
Members, please vote.
Cagle, aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 68 ayes and 62 noes, the bill is passed as amended and its title agreed to.